Over hundreds of shots every match, that pressure builds until the body finally reaches its limit. That limit had arrived. Carlos Alcaraz was supposed to dominate 2026. Every prediction pointed toward another historic season. Fans believed they were watching the beginning of a new tennis dynasty. He had already conquered the biggest stages in the sport, collected Grand Slam trophies, and established himself as one of the most exciting players of his generation. At just 23 years old, everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. Then, without warning, everything changed. One announcement sent shockwaves through the tennis world. Carlos Alcaraz was out. Not for a few days. Not because of a simple precaution. He disappeared from the biggest tournaments at the exact moment everyone expected him to shine. The questions came immediately. What really happened? Was it just another injury? Or was there a much bigger story hiding behind the headlines? By the end of this video, you'll understand why this setback could become one of the defining moments of his entire career. The timing could not have been worse. Only a few months earlier, Alcaraz looked almost unstoppable. His confidence was sky high, his movement was effortless, and every match reminded fans why many already considered him the future face of tennis. Opponents struggled to match his speed, his explosive forehand, and his incredible ability to turn defense into attack within seconds. He wasn't just winning. He was making elite players look ordinary. Every tournament added another chapter to his growing legacy. Analysts spoke about records that once seemed impossible. Former champions praised his mentality. Even his biggest rivals admitted that when Alcaraz played his best tennis, there was almost no answer for him. It felt like the sport had entered a new era. But elite sports can change in a single moment. Sometimes it isn't a dramatic fall or a visible accident that changes everything. Sometimes it begins with a tiny pain that most people never notice, a slight discomfort, a few seconds of hesitation between points, a medical timeout that fans quickly forget. For professional athletes, those small moments often become the beginning of something much bigger. That is exactly what happened with Carlos Alcaraz. At first, there was little reason to panic. He continued competing. He smiled during interviews. His team remained calm. Most fans assumed he would recover within days and continue chasing more titles. But behind closed doors, doctors were already becoming increasingly concerned. The problem wasn't simply pain. The real fear was what could happen if he continued playing through it. For a player whose entire game depends on explosive acceleration, violent topspin, and incredible wrist speed, even a minor injury can become devastating. Every forehand places enormous pressure on the wrist. Every serve transfers tremendous force through the same joint. The medical evaluations painted a picture far more serious than anyone expected. Instead of preparing for another title run, Alcaraz suddenly found himself facing weeks of recovery. Tournament withdrawals began one after another. Fans watched the calendar fill with events that would take place without one of the biggest stars in tennis. The disappointment spread quickly throughout the sport. Tournament organizers had built promotional campaigns around his appearance. Broadcasters expected another chapter in his growing rivalry with the world's best players. Millions of fans had already purchased tickets hoping to watch him compete. Instead, they were left wondering when, or even if, they would see him back at full strength. His absence changed more than tournament draws. It completely changed the balance of men's tennis. Every major event suddenly looked different. Rivals who expected to battle Alcaraz for trophies now saw a clearer path. The race for the world #1 ranking shifted overnight. Every ranking point he couldn't defend became an opportunity for someone else. But perhaps the biggest concern wasn't about rankings at all. It was about a pattern. This wasn't the first time Alcaraz had experienced physical problems during one of the most demanding parts of the season. Once again, his body seemed to be breaking down precisely when expectations were highest. Coincidence? Bad luck? Or was his breathtaking style of play slowly asking more from his body than any athlete could consistently give? That question now hangs over the future of his career. And when experts started comparing his situation to other tennis stars whose careers were altered by recurring injuries, the conversation became even more serious. Because this story isn't only about missing tournaments. It's about whether one of the brightest talents tennis has ever seen can continue playing the fearless, explosive style that made him a global superstar, or whether the sport is about to force him to change forever. The frightening part is that injuries like this rarely announce themselves with a dramatic collapse. They begin quietly. One uncomfortable swing becomes 10. One painful forehand becomes an entire match of hiding discomfort. Elite athletes become masters at masking pain because stopping is often harder than continuing. Carlos Alcaraz was no different. He kept fighting, believing he could manage the problem, but eventually the warning signs became impossible to ignore. Doctors reportedly advised complete rest rather than taking unnecessary risks. That single decision changed the entire season. Instead of preparing for the biggest tournaments on the calendar, Alcaraz suddenly found himself watching from the sidelines. Every week away from competition meant more than missed matches. It meant lost rhythm, lost ranking points, and missed opportunities that can never be recovered. For fans, it was heartbreaking. Tennis had been building toward another chapter in the incredible rivalry between Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. Every tournament promised another unforgettable battle between the two biggest stars of the new generation. Instead, those dream matchups disappeared before they even had a chance to happen. While Alcaraz focused on rehabilitation, the rest of the tour kept moving forward. His rivals continued collecting victories, lifting trophies, and adding valuable ranking points. The race for the world #1 ranking suddenly looked completely different. Momentum in professional tennis is everything, and months away from competition can erase an entire season's worth of hard work. But perhaps the biggest concern wasn't the rankings. It was the question everyone was afraid to ask. Has Carlos Alcaraz's explosive style finally caught up with him? Few players in history play with the same intensity. Every point is treated like match point. Every rally includes explosive sprints, fearless slides, impossible recoveries, and forehands struck with incredible force. That breathtaking style is exactly why millions of fans love watching him. It is also the reason his body absorbs enormous punishment every single week. Former players have often said that tennis is a marathon disguised as a sprint. Fans usually remember the spectacular winners, but they rarely see the thousands of practice swings, endless training sessions, and constant physical stress happening behind the scenes. Every tournament places another layer of pressure on muscles, tendons, and joints that are already operating near their limits. That is why recovery became the priority. Rather than rushing back for one tournament and risking a much longer absence, Alcaraz and his team chose patience. It wasn't an easy decision. Missing prestigious events hurts every competitor. Watching rivals celebrate titles that you once held is even harder. But sometimes protecting the future means sacrificing the present. Even several tennis legends have warned that careers are defined not only by talent, but also by durability. History is full of players whose potential was interrupted by recurring injuries. No one is suggesting that Alcaraz will follow that path, but the comparison alone shows how serious every recovery decision has become. Despite everything, there is still plenty of reason for optimism. Carlos Alcaraz is still one of the youngest superstars in professional tennis. He has already achieved milestones that many Hall of Fame players never reached during their entire careers. His determination, competitive spirit, and ability to overcome adversity have been proven again and again. In fact, some of his greatest victories came after difficult setbacks. Time after time, critics questioned whether he was ready, only for him to respond with unforgettable performances on the biggest stages. That resilience is one of the biggest reasons fans continue believing that this story is far from over. Now the attention shifts toward one question. When Alcaraz finally returns, will he be the same fearless player who overwhelmed the tennis world, or will this setback force him to adapt his game to protect his body for the future? The answer could shape the next decade of men's tennis. Because if Carlos Alcaraz comes back healthy, motivated, and determined to prove everyone wrong, every major tournament instantly becomes more exciting. His rivalry with Jannik Sinner could reach an entirely new level, giving fans one of the greatest eras modern tennis has ever seen. But if injuries continue interrupting his momentum year after year, the conversation changes completely. Instead of discussing how many Grand Slam titles he might win, People will begin asking how long his body can keep up with the incredible demands of his game. That is why this moment feels so important. It isn't simply about one injury or one missed tournament. It is about the future of one of tennis's brightest stars. The entire tennis world is now waiting for the same moment, the day Carlos Alcaraz walks back onto the court, healthy once again, ready to remind everyone exactly why he became one of the most exciting players of his generation. And when that day finally arrives, one question will still remain.